welcome everybody to another episode of the Data Stories 360 podcast, a podcast by the STELAR project where we aim to look at data at all the possible angles, hence the name 360. Today, we are here with Ian Makgill, who is a seasoned business technology professional with over 25 years of expertise in public procurement and supply chains. So today we're looking at data from the angle of public procurement and also data spaces. Ian Makgill is driven by his vision to improve the global procurement market. He is focused on helping governments unlock and utilize valuable procurement data for better outcomes. He is also a figure in the enRichMyData project, which is a sister project of STELAR. So we are very happy to talk to him about bridging the gap between data accessibility and smarter decision-making, both for suppliers and buyers. Ian, thank you for being with us today.
That's a very generous introduction. Thank you very, very much.
Well, we will say that it's well-deserved. So thank you again for agreeing to speak with us. As you know, we have prepared our extensive set of questions for you so that you can help us bring the topic of public procurement and data spaces closer to our public, as STELAR project has a very diverse target audience. So we really want to help our broad target audience understand these topics better. And I will start with the first question. So can you tell us a bit about your career journey and what actually what inspired you to found Spend Network?
I think like all good things, it started with failure, right? So in 2008, I was running a management consultancy that was mainly helping financial services companies work with government and government to work with financial services companies. And we were doing analysis and research and advice. And of course, the financial crisis meant that we went from an interesting company that was providing good services to someone that had to be, all of our contracts were cut virtually overnight. And I thought to myself, well, I really don't want to do that again. So I'm going to teach myself how to program and teach myself how to build databases. And I'm going to start gathering the data on how governments spend money. And I thought, how hard can it be, right? And it took, I don't know, it took a few months of teaching myself how to program in the evenings. Well, we kept the consultancy going. It's still the same company, but to reinvent ourselves as a data company took a few months, but actually I was moderately successful and successful enough to be able to do the data gathering properly and to make insightful analysis. So yeah, that's how we kind of a necessity and a dislike of day rates was how we got started.
Okay, great, inspiring to hear, as always, that something fruitful comes out of failure. So naturally, as we have already presented in our short introduction, and also you have shed some more light on your background now, you have a diverse background. So how would you say that your previous experiences have shaped your current role and your perspective on data-driven innovation?
Okay, so I think this is this is one of those questions where you can answer and go, well, I went to art school. I have no business being in a data-led environment, really. You know, I struggled with maths at school. I was not, but I think kind of what happened was that I learned, actually, once I started work and I started playing around with, when I was at art school, I was always interested in computers and graphic design and those kind of things. And I found that the idea of being able to prescribe to a machine how to do things and what data meant was a really interesting. It just became interesting to me. And it doesn't really matter. The fact that I came to it fairly obliquely was I think more powerful, because it allowed me to just go, okay, well, I don't have to absorb all of this dogmatic theory about how data should work or when you should use it or how to use it. I just need to know about how to make spreadsheets perform and some basics around statistics. And I can do the rest myself. I can learn the rest myself. And so I think that made it, that inability to accept the norm. No one would have taken on this job, right? I'm going to collect every tender in the world. Brilliant idea. No one would have. If you knew about data, you wouldn't have done that, especially if you knew about the public procurement data. So my ignorance, I think, is a really powerful motivator to build something better, because I was ignorant of how difficult it would be. And I think 90% of people, if they really knew what we were doing, they would just go, don't bother, it's a nightmare. And we just blundered into it and had enough success. So yeah, that's how being ignorant.
Once again, an inspiring answer, connected to the first one. Okay, thank you very much. So we can say that you actually gave us an answer on our third question. We wanted to ask you what motivated you on a personal level to continue working on the public procurement and data space. Do you maybe have something to add to this?
Yeah, I think it's really important that one of the reasons why we ended up, or I was interested in procurement, is that if you perceive that government and the wider public sector, that agency of people working to maintain the structures of society and drive them forwards, if you believe that that is fundamentally a good thing, which I do, then you will soon very, very quickly realize that all of those structures, all of that work is dictated in some small degree, but often in a large degree, by procurement. So we had this process where we develop these enormous strategies and these policies, and we tell organizations to implement those strategies and policies and their budgets, and we go, right, go and do it. And then the next thing that happens is they go to procurement. And it is the largest leverage point for the delivery of government work. There's the largest single leverage point for the delivery of society that you can find. Governments spend $13 trillion a year. And if we can do, that's with their suppliers, not globally, they just spend 13 trillion with their suppliers. And if I can make, 1% of 1% of that better, then I will have made a huge impact on society as a whole. Now, I'm not saying I can, but it's a nice ambition.
I think that actually that is making a big difference, especially when you look at how much data we are producing on a general level lately. And I personally always find it inspiring anytime somebody tries to make sense of even 1% of that data, and somebody working on the level of zooming in on governments and how they spend money is, I think, an even higher level of such a mission. Okay, thank you very much. So to move on to the enRichMyData project, Spend Network is a part of the enRichMyData project. So can you tell us in your own words a bit about your role, and seeing how you are working on structuring unstructured, semi-structured, and structured data? How is this expertise actually applied in the project?
So we're basically part of the team that is providing a business case, and we are working with the data that exists around the names of buyers, primarily for Europe, but we're also looking globally at what can we do to reconcile the name of a given buyer to a to something that is equivalent to a register of public entities. That's a long way of saying, the data about who buys what is terrible. You will get data that says, okay, this is, I don't know, Marseille, City Council of Marseille is buying something. But then the very same organization publishing the next tender will say, Council of Marseille, won't mention city. And each one of those, you can get dozens and dozens of cross-references. So it'll be like City of Marseille, top floor, or things like that. And we actually have to try and understand, and we want to bring order to that data. And so enRichMyData really helps us build in this process whereby we're going to go, okay, that's a university, that's a health institution, that's an education institution or a college, and that's a city council. And we're going to try, and we're doing that, and then bring in the structures that allow us to say, okay, this belongs in this region, so I can search for all of the opportunities in the southwest of France, or all of the opportunities not just in Denmark, but in Odense, or somewhere, in a particular area. So we're growing to try and do that on a systematic way for the whole world.
Okay, great, thank you. And how do you think that the project in general, the enRichMyData project in general, can help bridge the gap between public and private sectors, more specifically, especially when we're talking about data sharing and procurement transparency?
So I think this is really important, that actually everyone suffers. So procurement is one of those it's one of those strange problems that everyone wants the data to be better, as a principle. But the route to getting there is really hard, because actually you have to persuade dozens of individuals in hundreds of thousands of organizations to care about one tiny bit of administrative work sufficiently to make the data better. But actually it really helps everyone if it is better, because then they can go, okay, yeah, we've got a problem here, or, oh, that's a really good tender, I can take that. So the first thing we're doing is making that data accessible, and because we can find all of the tenders for robotic arms in universities, because then by doing that, actually it's easier for people to bid on robotic arms, and change it around, it's easier for universities to go, oh, well, who else has been buying robotic arms? What's their experience been? So by drawing that together, I think we create more competitive, more transparent, and ideally, there is a more efficient delivery of public monies in the long run.
Definitely sounds like it, and thank you for this explanation. And what would you say that it's actually what's actually in your opinion, or maybe something that you have identified in the project, what would you say is the biggest data obstacle in public procurement?
I think it's there are so many. So this is a hard one for me. The reason, to say okay, that I think I would go with its data quality, because often we see this idea that actually you can publish, for example, if I take it in the UK, you can publish attachments to a tender on one of our portals, and there is no detail of what is in those documents. So it could be a notice on how to use the web portal, it could be a notice that is a contract, it could be a notice that is a specification, it could be plans, it could be anything, and it's just known as an attachment. So that means that trying to understand what everything is and trying to make sense of it, we're using LLMs and we're trying to enhance the data, hence enRichMyData. but it's really, really hard work because someone did bad data design and the data quality, no one cared, right? And I think on a quick side note is that we're very bad at buying data services. We're getting a lot better at buying websites, and then we hand over developing a tool that people can use. Great. And then they develop these data structures that are absolutely incoherent. They're useless. Oh, I've got a nice shiny website, but the data underneath is an absolute hot mess. And I think that we have to, and I think you'll recognize this, there is a job for agencies who are being commissioned to make websites to own the quality of data as well as the front end.
Well, yes, and since I want to move on to make a connection between STELAR and enRichMyData, obviously we are very heavily focused on data quality as well. And I know that you do not have specific expertise in the agricultural sector, but we do want to make a connection since we are funded under the same call, these two projects. So we are about improving the data flow and also sharing for better decision making in agriculture, so data sharing. How can maybe your work in public procurement data relate to improving data systems for agriculture or maybe other sectors as well, but primarily maybe agriculture? Do you maybe have some idea?
Yeah, I mean, look, at a very base level, there are organizations, there's a Ministry of Agriculture in most countries across Europe, and what they buy and how they buy it, that's our remit. And can we make them more efficient? Can we make them understand a little bit about the importance of high quality data, but also good procurement? Yeah, we probably can, right? So at a very base level, that distribution of contracts by ministries of agriculture and local regional ministries, that makes sense. Equally, transport, other things like that, making sure that goods can transport around the country. Rudimentary.
Well,
sorry,
continue.
I think there's another part to this which I think is really interesting, which is actually one of the things that really is important is that in agriculture, we understand that the process of building shared data structures where many, many people are committing to providing data that is used in a centralized or an aggregate form is a really big and interesting, but typically hard challenge. And procurement is a really good example of how not to do it, where what we've done is a process of going, right, procurement is about a legal document, and therefore we're submitting legal documents, and all we're doing is we're digitizing those. And actually the period we're living through is a period of governments working out that digitizing documents is not the same as building great databases. And I think that actually, take grant making, take distribution of licenses, take whatever it is, land values, transactions. The job of building great databases is absolutely vital to the success of the agricultural sector. And if I can prove anything through procurement, it's the importance of building a great database.
Thank you very much for this answer. I couldn't agree more. Now, I would say that with your answer, you also gave us insight into something that I want to ask next, which is what do you think are the next big steps for transforming, what lessons can we take from Spend Network that can be applied in agricultural data management or even data sharing in other fields? So if you have maybe anything to add to this.
Yeah, I think it's really, there is a process by which we seek to this is particularly on an individual farm basis. We drive through some sort of bureaucracy, quite often grant management or whatever. We drive farmers to complete work or applications for grants in a way that is about, okay, how do I prevent fraud? We don't do enough about how to gather data that can be used in such a way as to identify and then later prevent fraud. So I'm a genuine believer that we should make it easier for applicants to engage and create great data. And by making it easier for the people who are creating the data, submitting the applications, and building better databases, we can actually do much more on prevention of fraud.
So prevention, not detection.
Both, right?
So both.
Because, yeah, because actually, if I've got great data, I can go, hold on, you know, these 15 farms, all in the same area, submitted all their applications within 3 minutes of each other. That's unusual. Why, you know, why? But I can only do that when my data is really good. And I've got that understanding of, like, okay, proximity and timing and all of those sort of things. And if I can just go, I think there's a cartel operating here, or I think there's an attempt to defraud us, I can spot the issues and go forwards. One of the biggest challenges that we can't spot cartels in procurement is because the data isn't good enough. So what we're trying to do is prevent fraud. Yeah, that we need to do that. But actually, the best thing is to make it easier to create the data and then spot the activities, because we don't know what we're trying to look for until we get all of the data. So that's one area I think it could be really improved.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very insightful. So since there is so much focus on data-driven solutions, what do you think is the next big step for transforming data in public procurement, in agriculture, and again, in other sectors?
Well, like everyone else, I'm going to say AI, right? And that's not a surprise, but I think I take a very different view of AI. I wrote a post on LinkedIn recently about how often we've failed to get an AI project over the line. Right? The vast majority of AI projects that we start fail. And interestingly, the one we're doing with enRichMyData is a success, and we're putting that into production now. And do you know, I will also say this, the reason it's a success is because I have been able to work with some of the best people in Europe to deliver that success. Because they're, you know, Matthias and the brilliant team there are just going, yeah, don't do that, do it like this. Great, you're amazing, thank you. So, you know, European success is coming out of these projects. So that's one thing I would just put to one side. But AI gives us the ability to parse data and to evaluate data and to spot errors in data and to triple check data at scale without human intervention. So matching and algorithmic matching of entities, those kind of things can be done at a much greater at a much greater scale and with far less human intervention, without the costs that would make it happen. So I'm a great believer in that. I'm not a great believer in public authorities or anyone else setting up a chatbot and then going, right, that's my job done. I can lay off 15 people in my grant administration or my procurement team. I think that's a terrible idea. So I think that's where we're going with that. I think it's a really interesting period, and there's so many opportunities. It's hard to quantify them right now.
It is, but also thank you still for giving us this insight. Of course, we have expected that you will highlight AI in any case, and now you already gave some insight on on this topic, so the next big future step from the perspective of enRichMyData. But still, can you expand on how you think enRichMyData and the STELAR project could help in shaping global data sharing ecosystems, especially as you have said that a lot of projects, EU projects that focus on AI do not potentially deliver as much as they should or thought they will?
So I think the expectation of delivery on AI is misplaced, right? So the first thing I would say here is this is really hard. Moving something that is a technology that is really, we're just beginning to get to grips with and turning that into a production success is incredibly hard. I mean, if you're getting more than 3% success rate, you're doing really well, I think. And I think that's growing now because the models are getting better. I think you're probably getting, in the latest rounds for AI projects, you'll probably be getting closer to 7 or 8%, maybe even 10% success rates, which is incredible, right? So that's the first thing I would say is we need to recalibrate how hard this is to do. But the second thing is that what happens, especially in our industry, but it could also be the same for agriculture, is that the interaction between the state and the, in our case, the supplier, or in your case, the landowner, can completely flip around, whereby the state can use models to research the activities of a landowner, pull down records from the land registry, look at yields, look at architectural, whatever it is, and make a decision about eligibility for grants based on pre-existing data, right? And then say, we've assessed all of your data. This is what we think is right for your grant. You can appeal if you don't like it. Rather than pushing people into a process whereby they have to go, right, this is what I do, this is where I live, this is and endlessly submit. So we can move whereby we manage by exception rather than by the rule. So those are the sorts of things that, so the dynamic is shifting, whereby the way that we gather up data and inject it into a state is completely changing. And I think that that's a really interesting way of looking at the way that data sharing can start to happen tacitly rather than deliberately.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for reminding us that this is really quite a young field, at least in some way when we look at it, and that we are living in a fast-paced world where we are now kind of used to expecting to see progress in a much quicker pace than before. So, Ian, thank you again for being part of our podcast. And before we finish up, I will just generally invite our audience to, if they're interested, to follow us on our website, follow us on our social media, and of course, contact either us or Ian for more. Thank you very much.
One very quick thing, look at the enRichMyData project. The team there are brilliant, they're amazing, and we're making, and I know STELAR are as well, but we're making really good progress. So I would encourage everyone to have a look at what we're up to.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing it out. Definitely, you will see this also on our socials, where we will also link to enRichMyData. And of course, we are looking forward to working with you guys more in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.